So excited to introduce our Direction, Not Perfection community today to Phil Richardson, CEO and founder of Homeopathy Health Services. Phil takes a whole person approach to burnout and overwhelm, has a background in science and integrative health. We are going to talk today about sleep and feeling more energized, managing stress, the emotional load, yes, please, reducing reliance on pharmaceuticals, managing hormones with confidence. Got a lot to unpack today, Phil. How are you?
Yeah, great, Lindsay. Lovely to talk to you today. And thank you very much for inviting me on to talk about homeopathy and how it could help.
Yes, I'm just thrilled to have this connection. You're going to resonate beautifully with our community today because
Right.
you're really hitting on all of these bullet points that I hear women talk about all the time. Whether that's they're talking about it because of frustration or they're worried about it. But you said something to the extent of women say these words like lower energy, poor sleep, but then they're also quick to layer on themselves. I should be coping better. We are quick to just blame ourselves or like, I
Yeah.
must be weak. I must not be able to handle it as well as that woman because they look like they're rocking it out and I'm suffering on the inside. So,
Yeah.
just to kind of kick this off, I'd be curious in your clinic, what's your common person that walks through the doors and what you're really noticing women need at the moment?
Right. That is a great question. I think the common denominator is working women in the main. So somebody who's working, typically has a family, has quite a complex life to manage. And they notice some physical changes. So they notice that eczema's come back. They had it in childhood and it's now come back. They think homeopathy can help with it, and they've tried medical treatments, steroid creams, and similar things. And what they notice is that the cream works and rash disappears, and then they come back and say they go back in to see a GP or a physician and prescribe the cream again. And they come to me and say, what can homeopathy help with? So I often see initially a physical symptom like I can't sleep, or I've got a headache, or I've got a rash, or I've got brain fog. There's normally one thing which is finally pushed them to ask for some help. But once you start to unpack it, and the way homeopathy works, it unpacks the whole person. So it is tell me about everything that's happened to you, everything that might have medically happened, everything that's emotionally happened, everything that's happened to you in your life to date. And it does go back to being in your mum's womb and even further back than that in the genetics of the family. And so what the conversation normally starts with is I've got eczema, or I've got a headache, or I've got brain fog, or I've got something like that. And then as I start to explore it, they say, actually, I'm really overwhelmed with everything. One of the great quotes I had, which might resonate with your listeners, is it feels like I've got 50 tabs open on a browser. And I find that it's increasing, not decreasing, and I never get to the end of it. But I feel I need to push on. So there's this whole mindset of trying to push through because that has worked as a mechanism before. There is there's a huge list of things to do, there's a whole list of people to talk to, a lot of things to sort out, lots of decisions to take. Actually, decision making is quite a central part of it. But it's these browsers being open and the inability to see an end to that. And once I get into it and I just sort of sit back and relax in the conversation, because the consultation will take an hour and a half, the first consultation. So it's plenty of time to talk through things. And then you start to sort of peel back the onion and you can see all the different layers.
First, okay, yes, agreed. There's so many layers, right? It's never simple. It's never
Yeah.
as easy. I'm also smiling because I have to tell you, there's a couple of ladies in our community that have t-shirts that say, I have 50 tabs open, and where's the music coming from?
Right.
Sometimes the device is open, and you're like,
Yes.
yes. So that
Yeah, absolutely.
resonates completely. You're describing to your point of like, we think we're struggling with something. And then there's also been this slow boil of maybe
Yeah.
discomfort from another area as well. Like whether it's overwhelm, whether it's maybe I'm more exhausted than I'd even let myself feel or talk about. And when you just said an hour and a half consult,
Yeah.
I think some people would be like, minds blown, right? Because they're
Yeah.
used to walking into the doctor. And I've literally had clients say, I was shut down. The second I got off my
Yeah.
topic, my physician paused me and said, that will be another visit. Today, we are here to
Yeah.
talk about this.
Yes.
So the idea of having that type of time in front of somebody that's the professional that will listen and go back as far as birth and before is it's honestly amazing.
I think the key thing is to give people enough time, and it needs to be their time. as opposed to my time.
Mhm.
So I tend to try and book appointments, even though if it's an hour and a half, I leave some time afterwards because normally I'm working through things or researching for the patient who's been through. But if we overrun a bit, that's okay. Or if somebody says, I can't cope anymore with this, I've just talked too much and I need to do something, then that's okay too. And we can just schedule another session. But it's often getting into the conversation. And part of the helping people unpack is I just talk through their timeline. So take me through what it was like at school. Talk me through what it was like when you were a teenager. You went through puberty. How did you manage that? What happened to you if you went to university or if you went out into another profession? Talk me through early work years. Talk me through where you are now and most of the women I see tend to be between sort of 35 and 55, that sort of age group. So they're either a rising star or they're actually very successful in some way, either running their own business or working for an organization and they themselves haven't had time to take stock of what they've done. And you start to see things having built up over time. And maybe I'll talk about it, Lindsay, in a second about the sort of some analogies that just help people get to grips with their own situation and how they've got to where they are. But I think the main thing is just giving somebody time. I talk to with my other colleagues about deep listening. That's deliberate listening rather than just being quiet while the other person speaks. And I think it's
Yes.
different. I think it is different.
It's so different. And actually, I was going to ask this question, and I think it has a lot to do with deep listening. I feel like I do it as a coach and a dietitian as well. But
Yeah.
when you're asking people to walk them back through how was school, how was going
Yeah.
to university, all these things, there's something that you're trying to pull. What nuggets
Yeah.
are you listening for that you're going, okay, like note that
Okay.
because
Yeah.
that's
Yeah.
going to make a difference here.
Yeah. So there's three broad aspects I'm listening for. I'm listening for things that might happen to them physically. Did they get measles or chicken pox? Did they ever break a bone? Did they have an allergic reaction to something? So I'm looking for things physical in their story. I'm looking for something that's emotional. So I'm also looking for did they have a trauma of some sort? Were they bullied at school? Did they lose a childhood friend? Did their parents or their relatives die young? Did they have a horrendous breakup with a partner? Were they fired at work without any real reason for that happening? So, looking for that type of trauma and then looking for emotional, which is tell me about times when you were sad. Tell me about times when you were unhappy. And this will normally come out in the conversation as we're working through. So I've got those three broad areas that I'm looking at, and then in addition to that, I ask some things which surprise people that I might be interested in. So I would ask, what do you really like to eat and drink? What do you crave? What is the one thing if you could have it now, you would have it? And also, what do you really dislike and not like? And all of these elements give clues to how I might then work with them for a prescription that might help. And I could talk about the differences between medicine and homeopathy because I think that might be important for everybody because there's some very big differences. But the key thing, what I'm doing is building clues. It's a bit like a detective where I'm trying to follow the life of the person who I'm talking to, who's trusting me to help them. So I'm trying to understand what happened. What was it like when you were very young? And as we go through, people will recall things that happened to them when they were 8 or 10 that they've forgotten completely about, but often they've never told anybody. And you get an opening which just helps in the well, maybe I can explain a little bit more about how I feel about myself because now I've talked about that, I can see how that's impacted on me. So there's quite a lot of that comes out. The big difference between a medical consultation, apart from the time, is that I'm not interested in doing any diagnosis. I don't want to say, well, you're depressed or you're sad or you're going through the perimenopause or menopause. The whole approach is not about classifying people. It's about super personalized, only for you. And I don't think I've ever written the same prescription twice.
It's so
Because
good.
people are so very different. They're so
Mhm.
very, very different. So the remedies are what a homeopath uses to help, and they're ultra dilutions of all sorts of different things, animal, vegetable, and mineral. There is nothing synthetic. So everything has a source that you could go out and touch.
Mhm.
I'm not suggesting you go and touch all the sources, but because there are about
That's
nine and
good.
a half thousand of them. It's an ultra safe, ultra diluted form, and it's the energy signature of the original substance that helps.
Mhm.
So whereas if you take something like a steroid cream and you put it on your eczema, the steroid cream beats back the immune response system. It effectively knocks it out, which stops the skin being irritated, which the eczema, the rash, as you might see, it disappears.
Right.
Homeopathy would go back and say, what is the sequence of changes to that person which has changed their underlying energy levels and their vital energy? And it will provide an energy stimulus to that. And that
Mhm.
signals the immune response, which then stops. But it doesn't suppress it because the immune response is the body's way of telling you, I've got a problem I'm trying to deal with.
Right.
Rise and stops it.
Yes, I was gonna say just with this pertains to this topic because I have a skin thing that pops out, and as a dietitian, my brain always goes straight to what am I eating that's causing
Yeah.
my
Yeah.
fingers to go wonky, and
Yeah.
I'd be curious on your part if you're like, well, sure, we would look at food choices, but like your
Yeah.
brain would go other places with that.
Yes. So I would go back as to why is the body responding that way?
Mhm.
Because the cause for me might not be the food that you're eating. It might be the sensitivity your body has to anything that it doesn't quite like. And the way it works, if I use a mobile phone as an analogy, and if you imagine you have a mobile phone and it normally lasts a whole day, so you can charge it overnight and you can use it for the day, and then it needs recharging overnight again. The body's very similar to that. But what we've been doing is we're adding more and more apps in, and each app takes some energy. And quite a lot of the apps on the phone are using energy, but you're not actually using the app. But the app's doing things like updating itself and it's checking the weather, even if you haven't checked the weather. It's downloading the news if you haven't read the news. So it's got a whole load of things going on, none of which you're using, but it is
Yes.
using energy. So that leaves a smaller and smaller and smaller amount of battery for you to use for things you're trying to do. Now, normally, if you've got a few apps and they're not used and they're not doing the updating, you've got loads of energy. So your phone lasts forever. And there'll be some days where you think, oh, it's still at 80% at the end of the day.
Yeah.
And then other days it's at 12%. Well, your body goes through the same thing. And the energy your body uses, it can use for keeping you healthy, doing overnight repairs, helping with brain clarity, helping with skin condition, helping with all of those things.
Mhm.
But if you're using it on other things, it can't. And if we come back to the food example, if you have low energy, you have higher susceptibility to things the body doesn't like. So you might take, I don't know, strawberries, and somebody has a reaction to strawberries. And then you're thinking, okay, well, what I'll do is take away the strawberries because that's what they've reacted to. Whereas what I would look at is how can I improve the resilience of the person so their body's not as sensitized and it doesn't go into panic mode and reacts to the strawberry so that in the future they can still have strawberries. So it's a slightly different. You absolutely need to do the initial part because they're obviously reacting to it and that's never good. But there are things that homeopathy can do to go back further into the energy system of the person and say, actually, the app is open for strawberry response, but actually, we don't need that app. We could delete it. So you can
Mhm.
homeopathically delete the app. And then you don't get the response.
Right. Yes,
So,
that's such a good analogy, by the way, because I think our
okay.
listeners could be like, I got it. I have running apps that I've not taken off the phone yet, out of the body yet, does not need to be there. And I was going to tell you, I don't know if you use any of the wearables to look at body batteries, but that's been a real eye opener on my end because I do struggle with energy, and it's interesting to see other clients recharge to 100%, and I can barely get to 60s. So
Yeah.
that's been like, uh-oh,
Yeah.
pay attention more, rest more, do whatever to make that body
Yeah.
battery go up. What are some of your tools that you're helping that are very tangible? Well, when you send a patient away going, we need a lot of rest and digest time, what does that look like?
I would think it's very complementary to what you've just described, but it's not the approach. I don't have that as a core part of my approach. What I'm interested in finding out is What is somebody presenting with today, which is the culmination of everything that's happened to them to this point? Two things. How can I help them ease where they are today? But more importantly, go back into their energy, into their vital force, and help adjust that so that problem doesn't happen again. And this takes time. I'll stick with eczema, but it could easily be allergies, hay fever allergies, or grass pollen allergies. They're typical presentations that I might see as part of a busy woman's life. I've got all of this going on, and I now can't see because my eyes are stinging, my nose is running, and it's all blocked, and I can't sleep properly, and I'm sneezing, or whatever is happening. If I can help relieve some of those symptoms, which you can with some of the acute homeopathic remedies, then I can start to work on why is she reacting to everything in the first place. So there's a bit of a double prompt. I do support it with some additional suggestions. So things like breathing exercises are really useful. Just take 5 minutes to breathe. And actually, for quite a lot of people, breathing for 5 minutes feels like a huge chunk of time that I'm asking for. But I just suggest they do some breathing and do some breath work. And I signpost them to read about it and they can have a look at it, how that might help them. Gut issues is often a big problem with people with anxiety and stress.
Yeah.
So the whole of their GI tract goes into overload, and they're thinking, "Well, I'm just having to go 5 or 6 times a day. It's ridiculous." So you can use things like Saccharomyces boulardii, which is a yeast, and it's a non-colonizing yeast because some yeasts can stay in the guts, and then you might have a problem with yeast buildup. But essentially, it just runs through the system, clears out the bacterial fauna, and allows the natural fauna to repopulate. And you can stabilize somebody very quickly by just taking a yeast. But it's this particular yeast. I'll send you a link so you can send it out to people so they know what it is. So I would recommend things like that and some herbal things like Agnus castus is great for women who've got hormone imbalance. So in their period cycle, where it might be heavy or light or come early, or there's cramping or there's other things, then you can use Agnus castus, just helps reset. And you can use that alongside homeopathic remedies. So I will prescribe and then recommend either activities to do, like turn your phone off at night, stop checking your emails in bed at night. I've got women who say, I have to turn on the subtitles on the TV because I've got so much going on in my head in the evening. If I don't have the subtitles on, I don't know what the news is, or I don't know what the program's telling me. So even though it's on and the sound is
Yeah.
up, I still have to have the subtitles on. So there are just some things like that. And of course, everybody knows that's what they shouldn't be doing that. But there's some of those habit things.
Yeah.
And then from a dietary point of view, and you might know this as well, is I set some rules about not having crisps for lunch or chips for lunch. What did you have for lunch? I didn't have time for lunch, so I just had some chips. That's all I had. I had some tortillas, and then that was my lunch because
Yeah.
they were in the cupboard and I could work on the laptop while I ate them out of the packet. And so just stop doing that. And it's quite interesting because sometimes people just need a nudge. And that's much more a coaching thing, really, but it's that reflection and nudging. But there's things that can sit around it to help, but the remedies are what's doing the heavy lifting in homeopathy.
This is wonderful. Thank you. So beautifully stated. And I'm just going to rewind and kind of summarize for our listeners because I think sometimes when we hear these big words come out of someone's mouth and we're like, wait, I should understand that and I should know how to go get it. You shouldn't, listeners. This is where we grab a fill. We grab somebody who can help us walk through what we need. So our job today is to expose that there are these other options. And then your job, listener, would be to go grab the professional to be handheld through it so that you don't feel like that's not supposed to be another emotional load for you. And then I love how you're saying there's these additional steps to, yes, we're going to treat with some things that you can just take, but we're also going to, there's actionable steps within your habits in the day that we need to work on. And I feel like that's the accountability piece where I can come in sometimes because I feel like a lot of individuals, especially these high achieving women, they're like, I know what to do. I just am not doing it. They can know not to go to bed with their phone. They can know that their flow needs to change somewhere in their day, but it's not happening. And to your point, sometimes it's a nudge, sometimes it's we need continued accountability. So we keep remembering how important that is. So it's a whole package. And I'm loving that you're stating that because it's never that easy. It's never just walk in, grab something, take something. They all work together. It's a moving puzzle.
Yeah. I think the other thing as well is to set a realistic expectation. And I know the podcast's about perfection, not doing perfection. And I think that's really important. I would say to somebody, well, how long have you had this? And it may be 10 years or 20 years. And I say, well, it's not going to fix overnight because we need to unravel it. So we need to give it time. So it's okay for the improvement not to be fantastic immediately. That's an okay place to be. And I'm guessing from a coaching point of view, that's exactly the same because one of the expectations now is everything is instant. Amazon will deliver in an hour, whatever you've imagined, depending on where you live, what city you live in, but you can have that immediacy. And with homeopathy, it is, I've no intent of helping fix this today. I've got no intent in doing that because it just won't work that way. And you need to commit for the long haul, really. But what we'll do, and the bit I think is also, so we talk about the initial consult, but the follow-up consult is an hour. So the follow-up is equally long. And we talk about, tell me what's changed. I don't ask what's improved. I don't ask what's better. I say, just tell me what's changed since the last. And quite a few women will start, well, nothing's really changed. And then I go back and say, well, let's have a look at you said you were waking at 3 o'clock every night. And that's probably to do with your liver. And it's probably to do with poor diet. So you've got high levels of toxicity and the liver is doing its cleanse. And that's typically 3 in the morning, between 3 and 4. And have you been waking at 3 still? Oh no, I haven't. No, that didn't. So there's a bit which is you kind of have to tease it out.
Yes.
Tease it out of the conversation. And some women say to me, is it okay if I keep a diary? And it's fantastic because they come back to the follow-up consultation and say, right, and they've almost got a spreadsheet running. Here's all the things I talked about. Here's all the things I said I would do. This is what I've done, and this is what's changed. But even how they talk about what's changed has changed.
Mm,
So even
yes.
even that whole piece, so it's not an intervention, it's a journey together, is how I see it.
Well, and I think the beautiful thing about sitting across the way from somebody where they can tease it out, because I'm smiling and laughing along with this idea. Like, I can't tell you how many times I start one of our sessions and the individual's like, it's been an awful week. And then by the time we're done with the session, we're like, actually,
Yeah.
you've done 5 to 10 things amazing. And there's this one thing that you felt went wrong, and it overlaid the entire success of everything else. So, I can just see that happening in your sessions too. Oh, I wasn't gathering those wins, those successes, and you're helping them to do that.
It makes a big difference. And I think the other thing is as you help people get more energy. So what the homeopathy does is it helps people get more energy because of the kind of woman they are, they then immediately spend it on something. So if I give you an example of a lady was in a clinic, she had all sorts of things like fibromyalgia, she had constant headaches, she couldn't think straight, she wasn't sleeping properly, wasn't eating properly, all of those things, didn't exercise, didn't do any of the things and that made her feel worse because she knew she should do all of those things and was having to have a nap in the afternoons, just couldn't cope. So she could only work part time. She could only work mornings because by the afternoon, completely exhausted. And we started to work together. And after about 6 months, I started to say, well, what's changed? Tell me what's changed since I last talked to you. And she said, well, I don't think anything's really changed. Anyway, as we got into it, it turned out she was now working full time. She had a new partner and she was going to the gym 3 times a week. But of course, her net energy, if we go back to the phone, she just added more apps in to use the extra battery power she had left. So
Yes.
she was using it. So then we had to talk about you need to think about the choices you're making because you will just end up going round and round in a cycle. And there's a limit to how much I can help you with. But she just hadn't realized she'd gone from being exhausted to being exhausted. But she'd also added in all these extra activities, including changing her relationships, changing her how she worked, everything changed. But she hadn't noticed it because she was innately in herself, she was a busy woman who did all of those things, but certainly been slowed down by all of the physical things that had happened to her.
Yes, that is such a great example. And you're right. women grab it and just respend it somewhere else. Except in this specific example, it's like a wonderful respending that she opened up all this lovely time to do
Yes.
things that mattered to her. So it was all this success. And that wasn't the first thing out of her mouth when she sat down, which is, again, mind blowing to me.
I've got
These are
another
great.
example, which is this sort of 50 browsers open example. And we talked about how she was coping with additional things that she was taking on. So, what I tend to find is somebody who's at that level doesn't have any boundaries. So, new things just get added to the list. There's nothing gets taken off the list. So, we talked a little bit about how are we going to get things off the list. And it wasn't a sort of a checklist type things, it was a behavioral type switch. And I said to her, what are the follow-up consults? I said, tell me about what's changed. And she said, well, she said, my children have said to me, I'm much bossier than I normally am, and they're getting a bit fed up because they're having to do things. And my husband has said, what's changed? And my friends have said, well, who are you? Where did you come from? Because she'd just been a massive sponge, just soaking up everybody's anxiety, everybody's tasks, everybody's chores, all of it. She thought, it'd just be quicker if I did it myself. It would just be quicker if I did that. And that was a big revelation that those things had happened. And actually, her relationships with other people had improved as a result of probably coming back to more to your work, Lindsay, about accountability, actually giving people their accountability back.
Mm. That's so interesting. And what a great example. I think that's going to resonate a lot because the boundary piece, as you were saying, relationships improved. I was actually also thinking there is a fall off of some relationships because people are so used to dumping their energy or issues on
Yeah.
you. And then when you're
Yeah.
not the one willing to accept it anymore, they're like, what?
Yes.
Where'd that friend go? So it's complicated and also goes back to your point of this is not a quick change. To make those massive boundary changes
Yes.
takes time.
Yes. And I think the issue with boundaries for women in the main is that they want to set it in the favor of somebody else
Mhm.
as opposed to set it in their favor. So it tends to be outside where a boundary should really be. Either it's in a relationship or responsibilities or doing leadership in a workspace or doing the extra hours or taking somebody else's kids somewhere or it's always setting the boundaries outside. So I think there's part of it which says, how do we help you toughen up? And it's not about saying you need to toughen up. There are remedies that will help you rewire internally your energy. So as a result, you toughen up. So there
Mhm.
are things that can be done to help support somebody who knows they need to do it, understands intellectually what the problem is, but hasn't actually managed a way of doing it. There are remedies that can just help with that. So I think those things sit alongside a plan,
Right.
which helps make the difference.
Right. Well, and even coming back to also energy and giving somebody energy back, all of a sudden, oh my gosh, so much stuff gets easier. The less of the emotional eating, the more of the like you have energy to handle harder conversations or energy
Yes.
to take the eye roll from the kids when you ask them for a
Yes.
chore. Yes.
Yeah. But also energy to do things you might be interested in. I have a number of women who like sports, who are very into sports,
Mhm.
and they will do running, 10K running, or they'll do tennis, or they'll do something else. So in the main, they don't see themselves as being ill.
Right.
But they do say, well, I get injury. I've had plantar fasciitis, or I've strained a ligament, or I've pulled a muscle, or I'm just more tired. And there are things that homeopathy can help with that too. So it can help with a problem with a bone or a tendon or a muscle, or it can help with skin. It can help skin look better. It can help rehydrate skin. There are things you could do. There's something called Natmur, which is brilliant for helping the body retain moisture. So it's like an internal moisturizer. So there are loads of, we've talked so far today, we've talked about lots of the fundamental person and how it can help, but there are things that can be done to help normal things, things that you might want to do on a day-to-day basis.
Yes. Yes. And thank you for pointing that out. I want to just recap some of these buzzwords for our listeners because
Okay.
some of them that you hit on headaches, plantar fasciitis, the fibromyalgia piece
Yeah.
that you brought up. Those are some big issues that my clients deal with that when
Okay.
they hear somebody else go, I could help with that.
Yeah.
That's huge. That's a whole nother resource because I feel like these individuals have banged down doors for years and they still have headaches and they still have fibromyalgia and they still, so it's like you're the hope story that
Right.
there's another resource to go to.
Yeah.
Which, so my question to you is, as we're kind of wrapping up, we're going to need a part two because I have so I have so many more questions. Do you do virtual visits? Like, where's the best place to
Yeah.
find you, keep following you, all of it?
Yeah. I do everything by Zoom. So I don't do
Okay.
anything in person. So it's convenient for anybody anywhere. And I run hours such that it would easily do the US. It would do the US up until about lunchtime, 11 or 12 in the morning. And I have a website, homeopathyhealthservices.com. People can go on and book an appointment on there, but there's loads of information on there too. And there's a blog which covers things like acute remedies for families to have at home. So there are things that can be done just having your medicine cupboard or your first aid cupboard for headaches or a bee sting or a cut or if you've scratched something. There's anyway, there are things in there too. So there's things on the website that would just help with some first aid type, which don't need a prescription. You can just use it directly. If people are interested, I can send you some of the homeopathic pharmacies people can buy online, but quite a lot of it's available just on Amazon. You can just buy it direct. So, but anyway, people can message me if they want on the website, and if they've got questions, I can very happy to answer. And if anybody wants to talk specifically about would this work for them, I do a discovery call. It's about 15 minutes or 20 minutes, and we just talk through who the person is, what challenges they're trying to deal with, and I talk about whether I can help or not.
That is wonderful. You're accessible to us. I love that. Thank you. Everything that you just said will go in the show notes. So if anyone's out
Okay.
running or folding laundry right now, you can go grab it from show notes. And I'm serious about a part two down the road.
Okay.
Thank you
Right. Sounds
today
good.
for your time, your
You're
wisdom,
welcome.
and joining us.